Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the video. Today, I'm very excited because we have picked 20 books, self-help books to be precise, and we're gonna rank them from bad until perfect. The way we're gonna know it's bad is I'm just gonna judge if the book had a lot of ideas or any aftertaste that I still remember. And some of these books, to be honest, I don't really remember too much of them. But the way I judge it is if I have at least one useful and interesting idea from a book that I have read, I call it a success. Perfect doesn't necessarily mean it's perfect in all means. It just means that it is perfect for me or it was kind of life-changing. And also what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give one key idea, like the idea that stuck in my mind after I have read these books. Hopefully I won't forget anything. Okay, let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into it. All right, number 1. 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. Oh, this is a tough one. I cannot put it to bad. Definitely cannot put it in the top tier. So I think I'm going with okay. The reason being is it has 12 rules, which is 12 points, and it just felt like this book could have been an Instagram post or an article. Like I could have easily read an article about each of them and a couple of sentences. But then here you have to read all this backstory, explanation, definition. Obviously not a bad book, but still I'm putting it okay. And the idea that I'm gonna share is stand up straight. So basically by just standing up straight and keeping your back straight, you express dominance, you express confidence and assertiveness. But let's jump right into the next one. The Alchemist. This was my high school read and I do remember this one. I think the guy's name was Santiago. He goes from Andalusia to Egypt. Pretty good one. I think I'm gonna put it to good. The big idea that I got from this book was you can turn stone into gold, or I guess it was steel. And the same thing, you have to kind of sacrifice your animals or whatever and then go sell everything or just lose everything and go to Egypt to find your destiny. But let's jump right into the next one, Rich Dad Poor Dad, The GOAT. I can pick this book, even if I'm blind, I'm just gonna put it to perfect. I remember when I was like 17 or something, I was sitting in my classroom and I picked up this book, I was reading it, and I was like, wow, if I just go with this path, this is where I'm gonna end up. So the book gave me a lot of ideas that still stuck in my mind, and I'm just still using all the same principles or ideas in my life, or at least planning to use them at some point of my life. The big idea would be you can never get financially independent with a 9-to-5. So you have to have sources of income. That could be business, real estate, that could be anything. But still, when you're pretty young, I think it kind of resonates with me and a lot of you. When you're pretty young, you have to work for experience, not for money. Anyways, next one, Ikigai. Look guys, I love this book, but I'm gonna put it to bad. The reason being is they describe all these wonderful ways of living until 100 or something, and obviously they go to Okinawa in Japan. The book itself was kind of very simple to me. Like at the end, the conclusion was you have to have pretty simple stuff like grow your own vegetables and love and whatever. So the big idea would be to live a long, happy life. You have to have friends and a community to spend good time with. Jumping on to the next one. 48 Laws of Power. Okay, I'm gonna put it to perfect because how on earth can you put the most helpful rules for, okay, not rules, but maybe ideas for people in one book? For example, conceal your intentions, befriend your enemy or something like that. This book was such an eye-opener for me in terms of how to communicate, how to negotiate, how to have interviews or how to apply for jobs. The big idea from this book is gonna be use absence to increase respect and honor. If you're too available to people or too available to anything, you basically lose your value and your status. Jumping on to the next one, Atomic Habits. Okay, this is a great book. The reason being is that the author described so simple steps to take for you to build habits. You know, before I thought about habits in a different way, and now I think of them as simple stuff that I have to do and show up and keep myself accountable. And it doesn't really matter the result. Like the goal is pretty good, but then if you build systems that can kind of be like a tree trunk for your lifestyle, that is when you actually win. And the big idea from this book would be show up every day, no matter for how many minutes. Let's imagine you're gonna meditate. It's better to meditate 5 minutes today and tomorrow and the next day rather than meditating for 1 hour and then forgetting about it tomorrow. Highly recommended. The next one, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. This might be the GOAT of the GOATs. Obviously, this is a perfect one. A lot of stuff to digest inside of this book. I still remember the stories about Charles Schwab, and was it like Steel Company or something? And then it gives you kind of practical, but at the same time very theoretical stuff to work with. And you can obviously work with your subconscious and do like, what was that, self-assurance, or I don't know, like self-repetition. There's really not much I can say about this book rather than saying perfect. And the big idea from this book that I got was knowledge is not a power. Knowledge is a potential power. So you have to use the things that you have learned and try them in practice. And then it's gonna stick with you and you're gonna grow. The next up, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Well, not a bad book, but still it doesn't have too much storytelling and it can't really resonate with me too much. Obviously it's more like a guidebook, just like writings of Marcus Aurelius, which is still good, but then it kind of gets saturated with all the other stoic posts on social media, videos and podcasts about stoicism. But still, let's jump to the big idea, and that's gonna be remember death to not worry about people's opinions, if I'm not mistaken. Next up is Influence by Robert Cialdini. Do I remember a lot of stuff from this book? The answer is gonna be no. But the big idea would be use reciprocity, and that's it. Like if you give someone a present or a gift or do something, it's very likely that that person is gonna be giving something in return. That's not to say that you have to do something and expect something from people, but I'm just saying that reciprocity works, and that's one of the options that you can do to persuade and convince people. Next up is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. A very practical book, a very insightful and useful in business, corporate world, in even education, academics. One thing that helped me immensely in my life, and that's why I'm putting it to grade, was be proactive. And that just simply means like if you're, obviously when you're young, you don't really have too much leverage. So what leverage you can have is to be punctual, to be proactive, to be hyperactive sometimes. And being proactive simply means doing stuff before people even anticipate you to do. So let's imagine you have a job or you're a software engineer or whatever, and then you could do some stuff before your client asks or before your manager asks, which means you're doing extra work, taking into consideration that people might consider other opinions or perspectives. The next up is gonna be 4-Hour Work Week. Oh, this is a pretty good one. I mean, when I read this, it was almost similar to Rich Dad Poor Dad, but it was more digital nomad style, if I'm not mistaken. So it kind of gives you some flexibility on how you actually want to approach your life. And then it also tells you that you don't really have to work 40 hours a week. Instead, you can build a life that doesn't really require you to work a lot. But the next one is The Way of the Superior Man. I'm putting it to good. Obviously, this is more about men. And it gives you some guidelines on how you should approach your intimate life, your relationships, your work, your leisure time. But let's talk about the big idea. And that's gonna be, if you have an ultimatum to choose between your perfect relationship or an opportunity to pursue your highest purpose or calling, you should always choose the second one. Moving on to the next, How to Win Friends and Influence People. No discussion here. This is probably the only book that I have read a couple of times, reread it, revisited. I have used them in practice, and boy do they work. Especially when I was reading this book, I was moving from my country to, I was moving abroad, and I was starting a new life in college. Thanks to this book, I have made some friends in past. The next up is Art of War. Tough one, but I'm gonna put it to bed. He will win. Who knows when to fight and when not to fight. Men's search for meaning. I mean, I really cannot say too much because the things that he talks about and the way they lived in the concentration camp was horrible. But what I have learned from this book was that you can lose your job, you can lose your wife, family. You can lose pretty much everything in your life. But until you lose your hope, there's still a way. The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. Well, when I read this book, I was so hyped and motivated. I mean, it's just more about the marketing than it is about the book itself, or it is about the content itself. Tough one. Probably too okay, because still it kind of tells you how to work with your subconscious and how to change it and what kind of experiences and examples she has experienced or people who are featured in this book have experienced. So I'm gonna put it to okay. The next up is The Power of Now. Well, not too many points in here, but still the big idea from this book is gonna be there has never been yesterday, there will never be tomorrow, there's always today. So when you procrastinate for tomorrow, you have to understand it will never happen. It's just gonna be today, but different today. The next one is the monk who sold his Ferrari, probably putting it to good. I do remember his experiences going to Nepal and then coming back and just changing his perspective, like this friend's perspective, in 2 nights, if I'm not mistaken. Oftentimes you find joy in fulfillment, not in cars, not in jewelry, but more in spiritual enlightenment. The richest man in Babylon. Probably I'm gonna put it to great. I mean, you get this wonderful stories from an ancient Babylon, how people used to save their money and get rich. Obviously it would take time. It's not like get rich quick scheme. Okay, and we are done. Let me know if you agree or disagree with me down in the comments, and we are gonna see each other in the next video.